constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Given the impotence of the media, it's the duty of intellectuals to speak out, and they don't come much more intellectual than Chomsky. He's credited with the central theory in the field of linguistics, that humans have an innate capacity for language that is hardwired into the brain. His very name has become a byword for the study of communication.
This is Chomsky. Nim, jokingly named after the great linguist Noam Chomsky, was the great hope of animal communication in the 1970s.
But his politics inspire rather less affection. His comments post 9/11, when he described the US as a leading terrorist state, drew hostile fire, even from allies on the left. But at 74, Chomsky shows no sign of relenting. In his speeches and writing, he has the gloves back on, denouncing Western greed and hypocrisy.
We need not rehearse the reasons why Britain and later the United States have been determined to control the Gulf region. It's enough to recall the observation of the State Department in 1945 that the resources of the region are a stupendous source of strategic power and one of the greatest material prizes in world history.
His most recent work is entitled Pirates and Emperors. I asked him first about the title.
That's plagiarized from St. Augustine, who in the City of God has a story about Alexander. His forces capture a pirate, and there's an audience between the pirate and the emperor, and he asks the pirate, "How dare you molest the seas?" And the pirate asks him, tells him, "I'm a small man with a tiny boat, so they call me a pirate. Now you're an emperor with a vast navy, and you molest the world, but they call you an emperor." You know? And that's a good allegory for the world, and in particular the contemporary world. The pirates are the ones who are condemned, not the emperors. Of course, the general population is attacked by both the emperors and the pirates. So it's not that the pirate, St. Augustine is not saying that the pirate is a nice fellow. He's just saying he's a small criminal as compared with a major criminal.
So who does control the world? Who are the emperors?
Overwhelmingly the United States since the Second World War, Britain before that, and concentrations of private power, which are enormous, and a tyrannical corporation is closely linked to the powerful states. It's a network of concentrated power with international institutions like the IMF and so on, which are called, they sometimes call themselves the masters of the world. That's a phrase that was in the Financial Times, a little ironically, but not wrong. Actually, they call themselves the masters of the universe. Adam Smith called themselves the masters of the world. Now they're called the masters of the universe.
You've gone a bit beyond it.
Yeah, didn't have space age in Smith's time.
But don't you sometimes need big government to deal with big business, that in a sense there is a kind of balance between these large forces?
It's like saying there's a balance between two members of the board of directors of General Motors. Yes, there's some kind of a balance, but they're so closely interlinked and they're connected that they're, to first approximation, they're the same thing.
Now, did September the 11th, do you think, mark a change in world politics?
It's a historic event. It was the first time in hundreds of years that the West, Europe, and its offshoots have suffered the kind of criminal atrocity that they constantly carry out against others, which is quite a change. That's why there's such shock in the West. This kind of thing we do to you, you don't do it to us. And it's like the reaction in England when, at the time of the so-called Indian Mutiny Rebellion in India, tremendous shock that they should do to us what we do to them all the time. Would use it as an opportunity to intensify repressive and sometimes violent actions, and that's just what's happened. So the Russians took it as an opportunity to step up their atrocities in Chechnya, assuming correctly that they would be authorized by Washington, at least tacitly, China did the same in Western China, Indonesia and Aceh, Israel and the occupied territories. And you run through the list. Countries ranging from the Central Asian dictatorships to democratic societies like the United States and others have used it as an opportunity to clamp down on their own citizens.
Now, looking at the current situation, when do you think is it right to intervene in the affairs of another nation?
I think there are conditions under which that would be possible. One basic condition is that nonviolent, you mean violent intervention, that nonviolent means have been exhausted. That's one condition. A second condition is that the people of the country in which you're intervening support the intervention. Under those conditions, and you can think of others, intervention would be justified. However, we don't ever apply those conditions. Take, say, South Africa under apartheid. There's no doubt that the overwhelming majority of the population would have favored intervention, probably military intervention. The other means had been tried for decades. Did anybody think of forceful intervention? Of course not, nor did I. Or take a recent case, East Timor. During the 1999, there were very large-scale atrocities going on. The population undoubtedly would have been delighted in military intervention. Well, Britain and the United States did intervene, namely by supporting Indonesia. Did anybody think of moving to do something else? Of course not. In fact, Britain was sending jets to Indonesia even after the Australian-led peacekeeping forces entered. That's the way the great powers intervene.
Now, you make quite a lot in the book of the fact that there is freedom of expression in America. But what you do point to is there's something more insidious, because you suggest that there is actually, though there may be freedom of expression, there's a control of freedom of thought. Now, how does that happen?
It was understood back at the time of the First World War that it's becoming much more difficult to control people by force. The popular struggles have led to the development of unions, parliamentary labor party, franchise extended, and so on. And coercion is just not going to work by force. So therefore you have to control thought. It's very striking that the contemporary systems of thought control, which are highly developed, very self-conscious, so leaders talk all about it, they come from England and the United States. So the British Ministry of Information, which any reader of Orwell knows what it was, that's from the First World War. It was aimed primarily to convert a pacifist population into raving anti-German fanatics. And it worked. And it impressed people. It impressed the business world. That's the origins of the modern public relations industry. It impressed American intellectuals who developed the conception of what they called manufacture of consent, control of thought. It impressed Hitler, who blamed the German defeat on superior Anglo-American propaganda and vowed that next time Germany would be prepared. And it has led in England and the United States primarily, England secondarily, to huge industries devoted to control of thought and attitudes, because you cannot control people by force.
But dissent has been growing since the 1960s in the Western world, and people are far more sophisticated now. Even popular culture reflects the fact that anything from the X-Files to the film The Insider, that the idea of people discussing things, of trying to manipulate public opinion, that's highly developed now.
Sure, but when people were under the lash, they knew about it too.